Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. We are well into the second half of Series 7 of today's Tolkien Times. I'm going to go ahead and begin Week 55 with our new Monday segment, Middle-earth Map Monday. It's been a fun series so far. I've enjoyed doing the maps. So far, I've been emphasizing the northwest of Middle-earth, right? We've looked at the Shire, the Old Forest, the Barrow Downs, Bree, Lindon, and the Grey Havens. Today, and next week too, if you don't mind a hint, we're going to go back in time a bit to look at parts of this region that had their heyday earlier on. Today, I'm planning to look at the two capital cities of the Kingdom of Arnor, Annúminas and Fornost. Let's start with a paragraph from Of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, found in the Silmarillion, where, regarding the first of today's locations, and referencing a bit of what we actually looked at last week, we read, Elendil was cast up by the waves in the land of Lindon, and he was befriended by Gil-galad. Thence he passed up the river Lune, and beyond Ered Luin he established his realm. And his people dwelt in many places in Eriador about the courses of the Lune and the Branduin. But his chief city was at Annúminas, beside the water of Lake Nenuial. At Fornost, upon the North Downs, also the Númenóreans dwelt, and in Cardolan, and in the hills of Rhudaur. And towers they raised upon Emen-Berid and upon Amon-Sul. And there remain many barrows and ruined works in those places. But the towers of Emen-Berid still look towards the sea. Now, in Appendix A of The Lord of the Rings, we read something similar, but what's important there is we get the year of its founding, Second Age 3320, from the Tale of Years. But rather than read both of those, I'll go to a draft found in the Peoples of Middle-earth, where we get a touch more detail than the appendices, along with confirmation of Second Age 3320. Foundation of the realm of Arnor in the north of the Westlands, with the city Annúminas. The stones are divided. Elendil retains 3 in the North Kingdom, at Annúminas, and on Amon-Sul, and in the Tower of Emen-Berid. Now, to help put that in a timeline for you, it would be another 210 years before the last alliance was formed, and another 11 years after that before the Second Age ended with the overthrow of Sauron. The city itself, according to the maps, was on the southeastern shore of Lake Evendim, or Nenuial, Lake of Twilight in Sindarin, about 100 miles due north of the Shire. It's a big lake. It's 50 miles from north to south and about 20 miles across, and the Branduin River flowed out of its eastern shore before eventually turning south towards the Shire. The name of the city is in Sindarin, and you've probably already guessed it, or at least parts of it. Annwn means west. Well, it literally means sunset. We see it in Henneth Annwn. It's related to the element dun, which means west, as in Dunedain, man of the west. And Minas means tower, as in Minas Tirith, the Tower of Guard. So Annúminas means Tower of the West. It remained the capital of Arnor for those 220 years between its founding and the end of the Second Age, and then until some time before Third Age 861. We don't have an exact time of its falling into ruin, but if we go to the chapter The Council of Elrond in The Lord of the Rings, Elrond tells us a bit about it. In the north, after the war and the slaughter of the Gladden fields, the men of Westerness were diminished, and their city of Annúminas beside Lake Evendim fell into ruin. And the heirs of Valandil removed and dwelt at Fornost on the high North Downs. And that now too is desolate. Men call it Dead Men's Dyke, and they fear to tread there. For the folk of Arnor dwindled, and their foes devoured them, and their lordship passed, leaving only green mounds in the grassy hills. Now, the disaster of the Gladden Fields took place in Third Age too, but falling into ruin doesn't happen overnight. Plus, it was the heirs of Valandil that moved the capital to Fornost at some future date, so generations later. But it still couldn't have been any later than Third Age 861, as that's when, following the death of King Eärendil of Arnor, that northern realm was divided into its 3 petty kingdoms, Arthedain, Cardolan, and Rhudaur. So, despite its falling into ruin, the 2 most important relics that Elendil brought with him, the Scepter of Annúminas and the Annúminas Stone, survived, but one of them only for a while. The Palantir survived another 1,000 or so years after the fall of the city, but it drowned with Arvedui, the last king of the Arthedain, in Third Age 1974. Now, the scepter, which came to be kept by Elrond in Rivendell, was eventually given to Aragorn after his coronation, right before he was wed to Elrond's daughter, Arwen. At that point, the scepter was almost certainly the oldest artifact of men in Middle-earth at more than 5,000 years old, as it was originally the symbol of office for the lords of Andunier in Numenor. As for the city itself, for more than 2,000 years it remained in ruins until the rule of King Elessar. In Appendix A, we read, "Our king, we call him, and when he comes north to his house in Anuminus restored, and stays for a while by Lake Evendim, then everyone in the Shire is glad." Well, now we've run out of time, and we won't be getting to Fornost until next week. It's a much quicker move from one to the other than it was back in the Third Age when they had to move capital cities. Plus, this week's episode won't fall into ruin either. But folks, that does wrap it up for Middle-earth Map Monday. If you have a mailbag question you'd like me to answer next series, please email it to barnabas@theprancingponypodcast.com. And after all, the reason I'm covering the maps this series is because the bag is pretty much empty. So send it in, let them know it's for today's Tolkien Times. I'll get to it as soon as I can. Now, I am grateful for the support of my patrons who make it possible for me to invest the time and resources into researching, writing, recording, and producing and editing these episodes. If you'd like to be a part of that, please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to find out how you can join the TTT Content Council, get a bonus episode every week, and more. And join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Tolkien Tuesday as we learn more about the professor himself. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Follow or subscribe in your podcast apps and leave reviews if possible. And follow @Tolkien Times on social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.